Welcome students to week 6, Globalization, Mission and Ministry, World Christianity and Migration. So this is the week that we move away from simply understanding globalization to understanding the potential church responses to globalization. But this week we're actually starting with the actual relationship between Christian mission and globalization. So let's unpack what we mean by Christian mission. Christianity is and has always been a missionary religion. Dana Robert, the well-known church historian, says that Christianity has always crossed boundaries with the gospel. The gospel is always seen in Christianity as universal. In Bryant Meyer's terms, it's a globalism, that it says how the world works globally and how it should be ordered. So the gospel is always universal, but it's always designed to be translated, designed to be contextualized. So, of course, it's interesting, right, when Hanselist talks about all globalization as a dynamic process between the global and the local, that we can see that that's always been true of Christianity. It's at the heart of Christian mission. Now, both Kim and Myers underline that when you cross boundaries with the gospel, you don't only cross boundaries with a set of beliefs, but also with the living out of the implications of those beliefs. So Kim talks about that to live out the implications of Christian belief includes living out the creation mandate, right? That being the steward of all creation with the goal of its full flourishing, and also being about the spiritual growth of every human being. So it includes very, very broad dimension. Myers talks about how living out the gospel is a matter of life, deed, word, and sign. So when we talk about the globalism of speaking into how the world works, how it should be ordered, having a vision of that vision goes from earth to sky and everything in between. Missionaries, as they cross boundaries, are catalysts. But Hanselist makes a very good argument for the fact that they don't actually, long-term, do the most effective work of mission. They start the mission, but it's the people in any given place that actually make the mission happen. And Hanselist uses 3 interesting examples for this. He talks about how missionaries from Rome brought the gospel to the Germanic tribes, but it didn't fully flourish. Christianity took off when Rome's domination ended. In China, when the foreign missionaries were kicked out of China, the church didn't die, it exploded. And he makes a very strong case for the fact that it was Africans who evangelized Africa, that there were missionaries who were the catalysts. And some of them were missionaries that happened back at the time of Jesus in Ethiopia. And some of them were much later Western missionaries. And he respects them, Hanselist. But he talks about how it was the pastoral agents who were African that actually took the gospel throughout Africa. And Hanselist, of course, the core point of his whole book is that every Christian migrant has always been a missionary. That missionaries are not just the people that are formally sent to cross boundaries with the gospel, but everyone who crosses boundaries, who's Christian, becomes a missionary. So let's talk now about world Christianity. Andrew Walls famously said that in the modern day, instead of mission being from the West to the rest, that mission is from everywhere to anywhere. And Hanselist makes a very strong case for the reality that mission always was from everywhere to anywhere, even though there was a time period when most formal missionaries came from the West to the rest. But of course, that has shifted. And Myers makes the point that Christianity is always growing, but it's always serial growth, that the center of Christianity has shifted over the history of over the whole history of Christianity, that the center of Christianity keeps shifting. And currently, the center of Christianity is very clearly in the south and east of the world. And you can see that little diagram, which shows it very vividly, right? That you can see that Africa used to be 25%, let's go back here. Africa used to be that little teeny gray sliver, and now it's 21%. Asia used to be that little teeny brown sliver, and now it's 15.4%. Latin America used to be 12.2, and it's now 21.9. North America used to be 14%, and it's now 12%. And Europe used to be 66%, and it's now 25%. And this was in 2010. It's accelerated since then. So you can see where the center of world Christianity is now. A couple of interesting thoughts. That Christianity always grows when it's cleansed of the contamination of colonialism. So, the three examples that Hanselis gives, I think, are three really good examples for that. That the shifting of the center may have to do with the cleansing of the contamination of colonialism. It also may have to do with population shifts, that the population of the world has shifted. The center of population has shifted from Europe to the south and the east. So those are both interesting dynamics. What are the characteristics of the current missionary center? Well, the first characteristic, which I find fascinating that Hanselis articulates, is that the new center doesn't claim cultural dominance. That when the center was the West, that the West claimed cultural dominance, but that the new center is culturally diverse and claims cultural diversity and allows for cultural diversity. And it's very interesting because Myers talks about Christianity as a globalism in competition with other globalisms, with neoliberal capitalism, with secular humanism, maybe with Islam. Hanselis doesn't talk about competition. He talks about the power and beauty of Christian mission, and he trusts that power and beauty will manifest the full power of the living God. But he doesn't talk about a competition. It's not how the new center thinks. So what else about the new center can we identify? And this is in Kim, it's in Myers, and it's in Hanselis. And there's enormous amount of evidence. It is charismatic. Sometimes they talk about it as Pentecostal, but it's broader than Pentecostal. It's charismatic. Great emphasis on healing, relatively communal, relatively poor, and that poverty leads to a commitment to social ministry and also to the building of agency among poor people and oppressed people. It's non-denominational or post-denominational. It advocates a strong personal moral ethic of purity and discipline. It's profoundly evangelical, but the way that it does evangelism is what Hanselis defines as witness as withness, that it's used to coexisting. It's used to being a minority religion coexisting with other religions. And so it understands deeply that the most effective evangelism is witness as witness. Hanselis also goes into depth, particularly on the gifts of migrant churches. So he starts by quoting Timothy Smith, that the migrant experience provokes theological reflection, that it dislocates and it awakens people's need, that you can no longer depend on the structures that you grew up with. And so you are open to a reconsideration of what matters. That results, and this is all, there's enormous amount of evidence for the rest of this, it results in fervent faith and commitment, churches in which the message of the gospel is applied to daily life, and they're innovative, which isn't surprising. Again, if you live on shifting ground, it opens you up to creativity. They practice embodied evangelism. That's the witness. It's the communal way of being. They interact with other poor people. They're usually located in poor areas. So Kim talks about how the development is shifting to church-based development. And of course, migrant churches are natural contexts for community development. And Myers talks about the role of this growing church of the South and East, which includes migrant churches, as giving voice to those who are harmed by globalization. So this cry for justice that is very natural, although of course the expression both of development and the cry for justice in the immigrant church is complicated, and we can certainly talk more about that if you want in the next synchronized session. So he also notes, Henselus notes, that migrant churches are full of natural missionaries because they've already crossed a boundary with the gospel. So it's easy for them to cross other boundaries with the gospel. They're naturally transnational. They're connected to their home countries and also to the country that they've immigrated to. And very often they are more able to share the gospel with Muslims than the traditional sort of missionary from the West trying to go into a Muslim country. So think about this, and I'll be very interested, as always, in reading your posts.